Do conservatives need to start watching CNN again? And what's up with the hands-off protests that happened around the country? And I'll tell you what the left caught me doing. All this and more on today's show. From the Family Foundation, I'm your host, Victoria Cobb, and I'll be joined by several members of our team to discuss today's hot topics. Well, welcome to today's episode. As you can see, I'm Victoria Cobb, but I'm not here with Candy Cushman, our usual host. I'm here with Jesse Blakely, a member of our team, and we are excited to have a chat about all sorts of things today. But first, let me remind our folks that if you are not already, please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast and also share it with a friend. This is a great way to kind of send out the issues of the day and how to talk about them. And we just want other folks to get the opportunity to be a part of this. So let me just start with that. And now I'm just going to launch right into all the fun stuff we have to talk about today. So it seems, as folks maybe are aware, conservatives aren't really a fan of CNN. We don't really watch.
No, I can't probably tell you the last time I watched any.
Yeah, it's not our usual turn on. And apparently it's not a lot of people's turn on because apparently the primetime viewership is down to like 500,000 people total. And I think Fox News is something like a couple million, and I haven't checked everybody, but I'm guessing CNN is the lowest. I think I recall hearing they are literally at the bottom of the news barrel at this point.
It seems like they're trying to do some things to maybe re-engage a conservative audience, or at least a little bit broader of an audience.
Well, that is what is so interesting, is I think we're seeing that they can't simply have left-wing ideologues all the time. And so they do now have a bright light in the middle of the really radical left-wing discussions that they have.
They do, and he's gone viral. So some people, well, many times over at this point, but some people in our audience may be familiar with Scott Jennings, who is a commentator on CNN and has joined a lot of their panel discussions and is pretty famous for the zingers that he throws out there.
Yeah, I don't watch CNN, so I really don't watch a lot of news shows because I don't have time to watch a lot of TV. So I catch a lot on X, and so I was starting to see these highlight reels. And then I got real familiar with him because our team decided to bring him in. We're actually going to have him live and in person at our Northern Virginia dinner coming up just around the corner, April 28th. If you want to hear this guy, and after we're done talking about it, you may be really wanting to hear him.
You definitely will.
After you see some of these clips we're going to share with you. So we do still have some tickets for sale. So we can make sure to put the link up for folks to join us for that dinner once they kind of hear. So we're excited to have him in person. But, you know, it's interesting because he's a Bush guy. That's really his background. And usually those aren't, they're just not usually the most radical.
It's a different era.
It was a different era.
Yeah.
It was a different era of what conservatism looked like and all of that. And I don't know that he's always been he's been on CNN for a while, and it's kind of only recently we're hearing these zingers. So I don't know if he's just feeling more comfortable and CNN's allowing him to do this, but it's kind of a more recent phenomenon that he's just kind of right out there. So
yeah, and we've had some great speakers at our events in the past, but I'm pretty excited. This is probably one of my favorites that we've had recently. No offense to anybody else, but I'm very, very excited. I've never heard him in person. I think it's going to be pretty entertaining and fun, but he's also right on with a lot of his comments.
So he hits the hard issues, all the stuff. So we'll show some of that. But he also hits some fun issues.
Yes,
so I think we got to, because it's in the vein of Easter time, I think we got to start out with his hot take, I guess, on Easter.
On the Easter Bunny.
All right, let's roll that clip.
A limit, okay?
All right. Scott Jennings.
Major problem. Human-sized Easter bunnies.
Yeah.
It is the season. And look, I think if you want, they're demonic. And I know parents like to have their children photographed with these human-sized demonic Easter bunnies. I counsel against it. If you want to show them a regular-sized rabbit, fine. The Cadbury bunny is fine. Human-sized Easter bunnies, out. They're right out.
They're terrifying.
Terrible. You only have 2 weeks to make your plans. Easter's coming. Eliminate this from your photo regimen. Do not traumatize your children.
All right, Jesse. He doesn't like Easter bunnies, live, big, in-person Easter bunnies. What's your take?
Does not like Easter bunnies. This is kind of a controversial point in this office. There's Grace Hemeke in the grassroots department, very anti-Easter bunny. Okay. I'm usually pro-holiday traditions, so I don't know if I'm exactly with Scott on this, but I see where he's coming from.
And I don't know if he's opposed to, like, the existence of an Easter bunny, like ideologically, like there are people who go, no, Easter is about Jesus. Let's not distract. And I think that's a really great point. Or if he just doesn't like the big
I think
human
it's the costumes. Yeah, I think it's which they can get kind of freaky.
I dislike other holidays and some of those kind of things, but for some reason the Easter bunny has actually never bothered me, whether he's big, small, on my table. I do like bunnies as decorations. You'll see a couple little pretty bunnies like out at my house for Easter. Not trying to distract from the cross.
Is your family going to go get a picture with the large human-sized Easter bunny?
They have in the past, and they were really cute. Now we go to Lewis Ginter Botanical Gardens, and the bunny is really tasteful there. And so maybe it's about what kind of large, and we haven't gone in a lot of years.
Well, the White House,
kids are getting older.
The White House has a bunny every year too.
Yeah,
so.
That's true. White House Easter roll and all that. Anyway, so hot take. Scott has strong opinions, and apparently other people do too. So curious about that. Now maybe we should
weigh in the comments.
Yeah.
Are you pro or against Easter bunny?
Yeah, and does it matter whether they're just sitting on a table as a decoration or they're a large Easter bunny in your in stores and whatnot? So all right, let's get to one of his more serious clips, or his, actually talking about some of the issues.
Yeah.
He has some strong opinions on free speech, and CNN does not.
And
like
he was
free
on
speech.
recently because, as our audience is probably familiar with, the Trump administration has been canceling student visas for people who have been at these, pro-Palestine, very, very anti-Israel violent protests, making statements that are violent against, the people of Israel. So, being here is a privilege, especially for people who are here from other countries. And the Trump administration has said, hey, if you're going to make violent threats against people, you can't be here. So that's kind of where this conversation started from. And so that's the position that the leftist on the panel is defending. And Scott has a great comeback to that.
All right, let's go ahead and roll that one.
You mentioned free speech, which we already know that people are being deported on the basis of not being able to have certain types of speech that this administration doesn't like. I mean, those are things that are happening right now in this country. You're talking about Europe, but that's happening here.
Yeah, well, I would remind you that over the course of the last several years, the left in this country has undertaken a massive effort to suppress the speech of conservatives. And to this day, the message from the left is,
I think
if you don't say what we like, we will engage in violent acts against you.
Okay, I'll let you and Dan
up.
in a second, but let's just.
All right, so it is actually nice to hear somebody on CNN stick up for for free speech, but also balancing that. I think it's funny because typically CNN's the one, I think, squashing free speech.
They have in the past. And yeah, it's funny, things like this, things like, free market economics, all this kind of stuff that we've heard the left kind of lambast in the past. All of a sudden they're coming out and defending it.
Like, is this a win in general? Just the fact that the left doesn't like the things we're doing, and so all of a sudden they're switching sides on something?
Well, I think it's positive that they are now kind of adopting the paradigm of conservatives, right? Although they seem to only want to defend these things when it's, domestic terrorists or, people on the left or people who are abusing kids in schools, whatever it is.
Yeah, it is funny how we both are now talking about similar principles, but applying them in completely different contexts.
The application for them seems only to be people who are abusing
guilty.
these privileges.
Yes, that's exactly right. But it is just given that CNN has only ever had one type of speech. I mean, that's what I find ironic about this is like the platform itself has barely been a place where free ideas have been exchanged because they just don't bring in hosts with a variety of ideas in the past. So
well, and even in this clip, he's getting shouted down.
Right. Like it's like we're not used to having you. Boom, squish. So that's.
But yeah, no, we appreciate Scott, and I think you made a really good point there, which is that this is not something that they've been known for doing, and also being able to come here is a privilege.
All right, well, let's go to one more clip. This kind of mixes the serious and the funny as well.
This is a great one.
Do you want to give the context to this?
Yeah. So the context of this one, they like to do some fun questions at the end of some of these panels, and so this one was. What would Scott's executive orders be if he was the president? And so he's going through a list of people that he thinks should be deported to El Salvador based on the very annoying behavior that they have here.
More than 15 seconds at the coffee creamer bar at the coffee shop, straight to El Salvador. 2 or more walking side by side on a sidewalk, you're gone, El Salvador. Recline your seat on an airplane, El Salvador. Disney adults, you're going to. And finally, pronouns in your email signature. Out of here. Those are my EOs.
All right. So what do you think of his list?
So people who take too long at coffee bars, absolutely agree. El Salvador, deportation. I would also add cyclists on major roadways. I think those people.
Well, we're getting all these bike lanes in weird places in my county.
Yeah.
They don't even connect to each other. And so I'm not really sure. And they're next to sidewalks, which I understand cyclists don't like to use sidewalks. But I'm like, okay, we have like, a couple hundred yards of a bike lane. Then what's the bike supposed to do? It's going to have to go on the roadway. So I don't understand some of these bike lanes.
Cyclists on major roadways, El Salvador. I would add people who use speakerphone in stores.
Yeah.
El Salvador.
All right.
How about you?
Mine would be people who are driving really slow in the fast lane. No one's surprised that bothers me. I'm quite sure. But I would, pull them over, get them out of here. They're blocking up my ability to get places. That would be my ad. But I appreciate that he's got this list. And I think
it's a good list.
I'd be curious, what folks would, if people want to throw some comments in on that. I think that's a fun discussion. Who else, if you were, king of the universe or just doing executive orders out of the White House, who gets
orders for a day, who gets to go?
Who gets to go? I'm sure we all would end up on someone's list.
Probably.
I'm now thinking about how long do I take at a coffee bar. Like, I don't think I take a long time because I don't put 10 million things in there, but I do put some cream. I don't know. Like,
just, it's about being considerate of the people around you.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Well, that's all right. So with that, I think we should just kind of roll out this last play. One more clip. And then right after this clip, I'm going to share with folks what I got busted doing by People for the American Way. And I'm going to have that conversation with one of our other teammates, Brittany Irving. So, but let's roll one more clip of
this is a great highlight reel.
Like a highlight reel for Scott Jennings to encourage you to check him out.
Democrats who say, in private meetings, I've seen Joe Biden do cartwheels and handstands while doing trigonometry while solving all the nation's problems. We now know that every single person who said that has been lying to the American people. One day, Donald Trump couldn't hold a glass of water, and we had like every medical person coming out of the woodwork. Should we have the 25th Amendment? Joe Biden could barely walk up the stairs.
And I would argue no proof that tech companies colluded to do this.
Was the New York Post thrown off Twitter?
They were, and then they...
It's organic. The entire Kamala Harris campaign has been organic. And so now we're...
What? Organic? This is the literal most manufactured presidential campaign ever. She didn't even run. A lot of men think Democrats care more about dudes who want to become women than dudes who just want to be dudes. It's pretty apparent the disdain with which they hold half of the country in.
It's not true. That's crazy, Scott.
I'm sorry. I'm just reading the journalism. I'm pro-journalist here. I'm reading the journalism about Hunter Biden running the ship here. She's like a true double threat. She's terrible on her feet when she gets unexpected questions, and simultaneously, she can't even answer the expected questions. You give me too much credit. I wish I had some billionaire friends. What's a mistake you've made? Nothing. What's a weakness you have? Nothing. What's the first law you want to pass? Nothing. What's a policy difference between you and Joe Biden? Nothing. Over and over and over. Empty, empty, empty. If she were an animal, she'd be a duck-billed platitude. But look, it's a total... In Walz himself, who gave the most disastrous response to a question about his own dishonesty about being in Tiananmen Square that I've ever heard. Effectively, what he has said is, sorry, guys, I'm too dumb to tell the truth. Fabrications in his own resume. And his answer was essentially, me no understand words good. I mean, is a buffoon.
Kamala Harris and Tim Walz believes is that it's none of your business what women do with their body. And so stay out of our doctor's offices and stay out of our bedrooms.
Well, I guess I'll have to speak up for the babies. They're not here to speak for themselves. Lord have mercy.
All right. So the other day, I got busted doing something by People for the American Way. And what was it? It was like a big crime. They busted me praying. So I joined this national prayer call that was a whole bunch of leaders around the country, and it was just praying for our nation. And the next day, I see this article, and I have gone on the watch list. So the watch list for People for the American Way, and you better watch me because I was praying. And here's what they wrote down as why I'm on the watch list. It said, Victoria Cobb of the Family Foundation of Virginia prays, quote, that the United States will come and follow God and then share that with the rest of the world because that in some ways was so much the vision of our founders. That was it. That's what they got me on. So first, let me just say, I love to pray. I don't feel concerned that I'm on a watch list for praying. I love to pray that people will come to follow Jesus Christ. And I think that is what Christians have to offer the world. So I'm going to double down on what I said. And more than that, I actually do believe our founders very much. I'm not going to say every one of them had a relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not going to say that, anything about all of that. But I am going to say that they were serious about evangelizing the nations, many of them, and that America, they came and they were excited to share God with those who were here and to further the gospel that was part of the religious freedom they wanted. So all that to say, I'm not backing off, but I thought I'd bring in Brittany Irving. She is our operations assistant, and she is a woman of prayer. And so I thought we'd chat about this. Why do you think they're so threatened by us praying as Christians? Like, how does that get on a watch list, you think?
Yeah, I think it is because the enemy knows the power of prayer. And so sometimes it's not necessarily the people, but sometimes it's the enemy that's driving them, and they don't understand. The person sometimes doesn't understand why they're upset. I mean, I've seen that before, but it's really the power that's in prayer. And so if the enemy knows the power in prayer, he's intimidated by that.
I think that's right. What do you think is the role of prayer in all of these cultural battles? I mean, what's that all about?
Yeah, so actually all throughout the word, it talks about prayer in the context of David. You see in the context of Daniel, prayer is an important part of the word of God. And so we know that there's battles that's being won because of prayer. It's happened all throughout the word. And so yeah, that's what I
mean, I'm going to give a hot take here, and this will get really controversial if the people for American Way are watching. But in Scripture, there's what happens in the natural, and then there's the spiritual realm right behind that, and there's real powers and forces that are at play there, and prayer is a big part of our role in all of that. That this, when we think about these sort of battle lines that are drawn over the definition of marriage or the definition of male and female, what is behind that? That we believe there's truly deception. It is truly coming from an enemy. I mean, these are really controversial Christian views, but that's the truth. And prayer plays a big part of that. And I feel like I brought you on here because you are a woman of prayer. You have passion around prayer. You have brought that to our team in a way that is amazing. And I just thought I'd ask, like, where did you get your heart for prayer?
Yes. So when I was 14, that's when I realized God was real. It's like I always knew there was a God, but I didn't know he was real. Like he could talk to you, you could speak to him, you could pray. And so at 14, I started praying. I would wake up early in the morning, I would just talk to God. He was my friend. I loved him so much. So then I still didn't understand the full power of prayer until I met my friend. And when I met my friend, she would just pray and pray. And I was like, there's no way I could pray like that. And so we started praying together. She was like, no. And one day she said, you're going to pray. I'm going to listen. You're going to pray. So when I went to pray and me and her started praying together and we started seeing things happen because of our prayer. It's one thing to pray something and it doesn't happen. It's another thing when you start praying and God is answering your prayers. And so that's what started to happen. God started answering our prayers. And when I would go places, I would pray with people where I was at. Like one time I went to the laundromat and started praying for this lady in the laundromat. And she was like, wow, how did you know that? And I was like, well, the Lord told me this. And she was like, wow, what church do you go to? And so there's actually that power to make you want to keep going, because when you see the results of prayer, prayer works. There's a verse I was thinking about that says, when my people that are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, he will forgive our sins and heal our land. And so if the enemy knows that if we humble ourselves and pray and seek his face and turn, that he will actually heal our land, he doesn't want our land to be healed.
And, that is the vision we all seek, right? This healing. Because so many people are caught in brokenness as a result of all the deception that goes out in our culture. That is, truly, that is why we engage this issue of public policy, is because the right principles operating in our government can free people from brokenness, from bondage, from addiction, from poverty, when it's sort of designed and operating the way it was intended to operate. And so it's an amazing thing. And at the Family Foundation, we've seen some unbelievable moments of prayer. I can remember my favorite prayer story, and I'll make it as short as I can, but there was a bill brought by our former governor, Governor Northam, who, as we know, believes that a baby can be born alive and then a decision can be made about it. So before he made this statement, he was a senator. He brings a bill, and his bill is that pregnancy centers should have to advertise abortion, that they have to tell these women that there's this alternative, which is the most absurd thing possible because we're trying to present that there is a better option to abortion. And all this to say, the pregnancy centers came together. We had the most amazing, powerful prayer time before we went over and had to talk to senators about why they shouldn't vote for this bill. We had to present in the committee. And I will just tell you, the committee was run by Senator Northam. So he's presenting a bill to a committee. He's a subcommittee that he's the chairman of. And it was controlled by all pro-abortion. So the majority, we knew the vote was up against us. And by the time the pregnancy centers were done testifying, now previously governor, then Senator Northam struck his own bill. And I will just tell you, there's no explanation for that. He still obviously holds the same views because he then made the statement later about a baby being born alive and taking its life. But he struck his own bill, and I believe it was entirely the result of prayer because there's no logical explanation for why you bring a bill, you have the votes, and then you strike it. So let me just maybe kind of wrap this little segment a little bit with you, just asking, like, how should a believer pray about these issues? What should be sort of the requests we're bringing to the Lord?
Yes. So we should pray according to the Bible. Like whatever the word says is right and true and honest and good, that's the way that we pray. You know, I try to pray even the Bible when I'm praying. So I'll quote a Bible verse that applies to what I'm praying. And so if we know that God loves children, so I'm going to pray Bible verses regarding children. If I know that God loves justice, I'm going to pray Bible verses regarding justice. He loves peace. I know there's he even revenges us. You know, that's a part of who he is as well. It's like he takes care of his children. He's a good father. And so when we're praying the word, we know that he'll answer because his word is true. And so I would suggest that we pray according to the word and that we also take the time to fast and pray because that's even what Esther did. You know, she was faced with a problem and she was faced with a situation where her people were getting ready to be like annihilated. She fasted and prayed to her God and God answered. And so that's the power of prayer, is that we have the ability to change the heart of the king. That's changing the heart of people in government and leadership. We have the ability to do that on our knees or standing up or however you like to pray. We have the ability to change things.
I love that you brought up Esther. She is one of my favorite examples. I actually used to teach a lobbying seminar out of Esther because she is really a biblical model of presenting an issue before a person of power and making change. And I love that story so much because she's not going in her own strength. She's not going in her own wise arguments. She's going because she's been girded up in prayer and fasting, and the people are behind her, supporting her with prayer. So anyway, awesome example. So thank you, Brittany, for just being a part of this because, again, when you're caught praying, if there is anything I want to go down for in human history, I want to go down for being busted praying. So may that all be our how we are remembered in this life, even though the opponents apparently think it's super scary to pray. So for our last little bit on this show today, we are actually going to talk with another teammate, Michael Sylvester, about the role of government in our lives. And apparently now we're kind of seeing that, we think of it as government is there simply to protect our first freedoms and make sure we're safe. But we've noticed that the left is lately talking about the government not being too overbearing. And it's just funny that Jesse and I talked to this earlier, that we're finding that even the left is saying we want less government, although they're saying it differently. So I'm going to just roll a clip of the most recent protests, the hands-off protests that were happening around the country by those on the left. And then I'll chat with Michael Sylvester.
Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like.
So there have been these protests, as we just saw, across the country, and they got a lot of airtime, and they were in many, many places. And the left is basically just going to town about how there's too much government, which is a funny thing to hear from the left because typically that is the concern of those that are more conservative, which is like our government's gotten too big, it's too powerful in our lives. We're actually believers of that there are different spheres that should have control in one's life, that the family has a certain role, that the church has a certain role, and government has a certain role. And when government steps into all those other spaces, it's actually a problem. And so I'm excited to have Michael Sylvester here to talk about this a little bit because we can all remember a time when government was far too involved in our lives. And our law center, Michael is an attorney with our Founding Freedoms Law Center and one of our great team members here at the Family Foundation. And we really, the number of clients that we see because of this period of time where government just went berserk during the pandemic and basically said, everybody has to do what we say in all these various capacities. And then they encouraged employers, because government was so overreaching. I think employers also felt that they could be overreaching in their demands of employees. And this largely ended up being about vaccines, although not exclusively. There were other issues that were at play at that time. But we have several issues of litigation or issues of legal matters for clients that have to do with this issue that they truly were actually terminated from employers because their faith said one thing and the employer demanded another. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the cases that have been ongoing with Founding Freedoms Law Center around control?
Yes. Well, religious liberty is fundamental in America, right? It's part of who we are. It's part of our DNA. Therefore, not only do we have the Constitution that protects our religious liberties, but we also have many state and federal statutes that protect us in all kinds of different settings, including in the workplace. So we've been using those statutes to protect just a good number of religious employees who were terminated because of their employer said, no jab, no job.
No jab, no job. And I think, it's amazing. I feel like, we're so many years past this. And yet these people lost jobs and deserve to have that righted. I think we are seeing finally the courts we're seeing some good decisions where courts are going, oh, maybe that did go too far. It did trample someone's religious freedom. So tell us about, there's two particular health systems, basically, that we've had a lot of folks that were fired from. Can you tell us a little bit about those cases?
Yeah, I think we started off throughout the nation because there's been litigation everywhere. But if we started off and the courts were pushing against these cases, and a lot of them were getting dismissed, we're starting to see that change. Courts of appeals around the nation, frankly, including the Fourth Circuit just in January, are putting out more opinions that are favorable toward religion. But currently we're litigating a case against the University of Virginia Health Systems on behalf of several plaintiffs who were healthcare workers and fired for not taking the COVID shot, specifically in connection to their religious beliefs that kept them from taking the COVID shot. We're also representing several employees against the Inova Health System in Northern Virginia. Same scenario. So those cases are ongoing. The Inova case is in the Fourth Circuit right now, up on appeal. And then we've just represented several other clients. We've seen many favorable outcomes. And I'll say, our law center represents a whole variety of individuals, school board members, teachers, parents, on just a lot of different First Amendment issues. But even in the midst of that, last year we were able to see more than $1 million recovered on behalf of clients in this religious liberty employment context.
Because there are real losses. I mean, someone loses their job, that's their livelihood, and they're going to have to go out, find another job. And so it is, some of these things, you're not going to ever get back, you're probably not going to get back your old job as it was, even if you win this thing. Maybe that happens once in a blue moon, but you're going to need to recoup some losses there. And these are people who, my understanding is, and maybe you don't have to get into the specifics of every case, but it's some people who the employer decided, well, these religious exemptions count, and these other ones we don't think are real religions, or we don't think they're valid. I mean, is that essentially what we had going on, or some just rejected all of them, or what?
We were seeing a lot of arbitrariness in the way that employers were going about deciding who gets accommodated and who doesn't, who has a valid religious belief and who doesn't. And that's what these circuit court opinions, these appellate court opinions, are trying to correct now. So it's really encouraging to see. But yeah, it's employers just kind of making their own choice as to who has a valid valid religious belief and who doesn't. And what's remarkable also is a lot of the employees that we've represented, not all of them, but a lot of them worked from home. So there really wasn't any concern of anybody being infected through Zoom or over the telephone, right? But nonetheless, in fact, one large healthcare system that we're preparing to sue right now on behalf of 3 clients, it particularly emphasized that it just wanted to have a message that was favorable to the COVID vaccine.
Wow.
And that was part of the reason for why it was trying to force its work from home employees to take the COVID shot. And that's incredible.
Actually said, like, they actually have admitted that, or that they just wanted to sort of be in a posture of everyone should take this thing?
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
Yep. So that's incredible, especially when we know our nation is filled with a vast array of religious diversity. To have a large employer trying to just force homogeneity despite that religious diversity is just incredible.
I would say that most people do not want either our government or employers deciding what's valid faith, right? They're not equipped to go, that's a real legit reason and this one's not. And we sure don't want them to say, we as a private employer are going to take a position on something that is a little controversial, and therefore, if you're going to work with us, you're going to have to get this vax. That is, right, deeply alarming. And I think it's just so important. Tell me, why do you think it's important that we push back on this? I mean, beyond just for these clients, we obviously work for clients. We are trying to help these individuals right the wrong that was done to them. But on a larger picture, what else is this work is being done, that these clients are represented? What's the value of that?
It's crucial. I mean, the vaccine issue, obviously, lots of folks, different opinions. Christians had different perspectives on this issue. For many of the clients that we've represented, it was the connection of the COVID vaccine to abortion and aborted fetal cell lines that were used in the development of the COVID vaccine, more so than other medications. The COVID shot had a stronger connection to that. But different folks reach different conclusions, and that's completely understandable. But in America, it's not the popular that need protection. It's the unpopular. Mm-hmm. So throughout our nation, whether it was conscientious objectors, different folks have different religious views on that, whether it's the Amish and their view on public school education. There was a major Supreme Court case on animal sacrifice, and there was a district or a locality that was particularly targeting that religion. And a great First Amendment principle came out of that Supreme Court case. So it's when we protect the unpopular, even if we don't necessarily agree with what their viewpoint is, we're actually providing principles to protect our own religious views and the views of those that we love.
And I assume that in some of these court rulings, it's also been the case that you're aiming for, if the government's going to restrict, if they're ever going to force you to do something, it's supposed to be in the least restrictive manner, right? You would like to think that an employer would sort of understand that concept too and go, okay, a remote employee, I mean, there's no reason that I have any compelling reason to step in between a remote employee. You'd like to think that government has to have a really compelling reason. I mean, a really compelling reason. And they have to do it in the least restrictive manner. And you'd like to think that concept would be understood by large employers that, look, if we're going to trample someone's First Amendment rights, it better be for an overwhelming. And we've had some great cases. U.S. Supreme Court recently had the Goff case, which was a mailman. And I mean, I'll probably do a poor job explaining it. But, it was kind of like this employer, which happened to be the government, because it was a post office worker. But they shouldn't step in and force this guy to violate his faith by forcing him to, it was working on a Sunday, was it not?
That's right, yeah.
The post office used to never deliver mail on Sundays, and then they do. And all of a sudden this guy's, forced. Do you really have to have that mailman do that delivery route on that day? No, probably not. And so we've got some good rulings.
So you say for the government, least restrictive means, and then Victoria, you mentioned the Groff decision. So what came out from there is previously employers could almost in any circumstance say that they would endure an undue hardship if they accommodated their religious employees' beliefs. And the Groff decision says no more. The actual standard is substantial hardship.
Oh, good. I like that.
So much protection for religious employees. And that's what the statute said. It just had been watered down by court opinions. So we turned back to a much more robust religious protection.
We are so looking forward to seeing the outcomes of these cases that our Founding Freedoms Law Center is working on. We want justice for these individuals, and we want to remind employers that they better not step on people's First Amendment rights, that our our faith matters. And I'm glad the U.S. Supreme Court has really gotten to a place where we've seen some very strong decisions by them that are helping, I think, just provide the right principles for employers. And so we're looking forward to when you're going to come back on the show and tell us about some awesome wins for some of these folks. But we are grateful to have a law center to be able to do this kind of work, because again, there's the legislative, but sometimes you have to step into the justice system to actually get the principles to be enacted correctly by employers and others. So with that, I think we'll wrap up today's show, but we're glad that you tuned in. And remember, we are stronger when we speak together. See you next week.